These are the assignments, or not the assignments, the problems you were working in class. So I'm just going to briefly go to the ones we did in class, and then I'm going to go through the ones that I want you to, just go over it. So first one, it tells tell whether the quotient is positive or negative without dividing. So I have a positive and a negative, and again, just remember that if the signs are different, right, we are going to have a negative quotient in this case. And here we have a negative divided by a negative, and you know what? If it helps, you can write it like this, so that you can see that it's a negative divided by a negative, and that therefore the answer is positive. Over here, the negative, it's written like, let me just make it a little bit bigger. 9,487 divided by 81,212. So instead, I'm going to change this problem, and I'm just simply going to write 10 over 2. Now, you notice that this negative sign is not with the numerator and it's not with the denominator, but it is affecting the whole fraction. So if you were to actually take this a step further, 10 divided by 2 is 5, and this would come over here, right? So which would make this a negative quotient. So the answer would be negative. We can make this a little bigger. Yes, I can. Well, so over here, we have a positive 10 divided by negative 5, so I know this is going to be a negative answer. Negative 10 divided by positive 5, again, the signs are different, so this is going to be negative as well. Negative 10 and a negative 5, so a negative divided by a negative is going to give me a positive. And this is the case that I just showed you on top, so if you, let me just write this like this. And in parentheses, can we do anything here? We can simplify 10 over 5 and just simply write 2. We can remove the parentheses, but that still leaves that minus sign in front of the 2. So that would give me a negative sign. So which one does not belong? Obviously, this guy doesn't belong because this one is positive and all the rest are negative. Hopefully, I shouldn't be worried too much about your division skills, but again, 21 divided by 7 is still 3, but you have to worry about the signs now. So this is negative. A negative divided by a negative is a positive, and that's going to be plus 3. This says negative 14 divided by positive 2, so it's a negative divided by positive, so the signs are different, negative. And 14 divided by 7 is 2. 15 divided by 15 divided by 5 is 3. And now let's worry about the signs. A negative divided by a negative, so that's going to give us positive 3. Positive divided by a negative, it's going to be negative, and 54 divided by 9 is 6. 0 divided by something, it's just going to be 0. Over here, it's 2 operations, 2 divisions, so I'm going to do this left to right. 50 divided by negative 5, it's a positive divided by a negative, so I get negative, and 50 divided by 5 is 10, which I'm then going to divide by 2, right? So 10 divided by 2 is 5. Let's talk about the signs now. It's a negative divided by a positive, so it's a negative. Over here, same thing. Let's take care of these two from left to right. Negative 54 and positive 9 is a negative, and negative 6, which I'm going to now divide that by negative 2. And a negative divided by a negative is a positive, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. So you got to do 2 things. You got to worry about the numerical answer, and you got to worry about whether the sign is going to be negative or positive. Okay? Can I make this even bigger? Can I? I can. Alright, so this one, I want to make sure that you are completely okay with. Okay, so one of the most important things here would be how you do the substitution. And by substituting correctly, the rest should be a matter of order of operations. So x is 10 divided by y, which is negative 2. So we have a positive divided by a negative, so that's going to be negative. 10 divided by 2 is 5. 10 times y to the second power. Y is negative 2, so let's put a negative 2 in parentheses, raised to the second power. And z is negative 5. So let's take care on the top, okay, get that whole thing to become just one number, and then divide it by negative 5. So order of operations, so on top, I can't multiply yet, right? I have to do negative 2 to the second power. So let me take that. I'm going to write 10 times and negative 2 to the second power. And I'm going to write it over here. It's negative 2 times negative 2. It's a negative times a negative, which is positive 4 or times 4 over negative 5. Continuing. 10 times 4 on the top is going to be 40. At the bottom, I'm just going to put the negative 5. And again, continuing again. It's 40 divided by negative 5, which is a positive divided by a negative, and you get negative 8. Okay, so that becomes this, which becomes this, and we have our number. Absolute value. So let's take the absolute value of x times y divided by negative y. So x is 10. X times z, sorry. Z is negative 5. And y is minus, right? So remember, this is what you have. So when we're substituting, we're replacing the variable with a value, the given value, which is negative 2. So that stays. We're going to take the y out. So remember, imagine replacing, just taking the y out and replacing it with negative 2. This is kind of weird, right? So let me put a parentheses. So anytime you're substituting a negative number, put it in parentheses. So I'm going to have minus parentheses negative 2. So all I did was change my variables for its given value. Don't take the absolute value yet. Let's change that. That's to the top. 10 times negative 5 is negative 50. You have two minus signs together, and you have a minus sign, in front of a parenthesis. So remember, in front of every parenthesis, there's a 1, and I'm going to put that in red. So pretend there's a 1 here. That makes it negative 1 times negative 2, which is going to give us positive, and negative times a negative is a positive. So I'm going to get 2. Don't take the absolute value yet. Let's go ahead and divide negative 50 divided by 2. That's going to give us negative 25. Now I can take the absolute value of negative 25, and we're measuring the distance. That number is away from 0, so negative 25 is 25 units away from 0, and that's my final answer. Again, let me substitute. So if I substitute, there's that minus sign. Let me take the x out and replace it with a 10 to the second power plus 6 times z, which is negative 5. I'll put that in parentheses over y, which in this case is negative 2. So that's what my expression looks like when I substitute it. This says take x to the x and raise it to the second power, which is 10. The value of x is 10. 10 to the second power is 100, right? So I'm taking this guy, and then I'm going to attach that minus sign in front. Plus 6 times negative 5, it's a positive times a negative, so that's going to give me negative 30. And divide that by negative 2. Let's do the top. On the numerator, I have a negative 100 plus negative 30. So in this case, remember, we can't make 0 pairs because they're both negative. So it's just going to be a bigger group of negative numbers. So negative 130 over negative 2, which is going to give you negative divided by a negative is going to give us a positive number, and 130 divided by 2 is 65. And that's the answer I'm looking for. An airplane descends from an altitude, so your airplane is way on top at 1200 and above ground in 4 minutes. What integers represent the average change? So here's your airplane is here on top, right? Here's the ground level. It's flying, and it's going this direction. Okay, so every second it passes for the next 4 minutes, it's going lower and lower and lower. So we have a change in altitude that's going to be negative, right? It's going to drop. So we're going to go 1,200, and we know that it went to the ground in 4 minutes. So let's divide that by 4. And 1,200 divided by 4 is 300. But I'm going to put that's the answer, right? 300. But the integer that represents the change in altitude is going to be negative 300 because every minute is descending by 300. Okay. Find the mean. So now remember what the mean is. We add up all the numbers, right? And we divide by however many numbers are in the set. So in this case, let's add. So it's going to be 3 plus negative 10 plus negative 2 plus 13 and plus 11. Okay, so do 2 at a time. 3 plus negative 10, I can make some 0 pairs, right? 3 of this with 3 of this. I'm going to have negative 7 left over. I'm going to add it to negative 2 plus 13 plus 11. Now I'm doing this a really long way. Negative 7 plus negative 2 is just negative 9, right? Because no 0 pairs, it's going to be a bigger group. Plus 13 plus 11. Negative 9 and negative 13. I have more positive numbers, so the positives, I can make 0 pairs, and after I make 0 pairs, I'm going to have 4 positives left over. And finally, 4 plus 11, which is pretty much 15. I'm not done yet, because now I have to take that sum and divide it by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers. And 15 divided by 5 is going to give me 3. So the mean of this data set is 3. Likewise, do the same thing here. Negative 26 and plus 39 plus negative 10 plus negative 16, plus 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and plus 31. So you can add and keep adding. So negative 26 and plus positive 39. 39 is the bigger number here. The absolute value is the bigger number. So we're going to take the sign of that number. And the difference between 26 and 39 is 13, right? If you make 0 pairs, you're going to have 13 positives left over. Plus negative 10. So if I do 13 plus negative 10, again, you can tell that I can make 0 pairs. And after I make 0 pairs, I'm going to have 3 positives left over. And now 3 plus this guy over here, plus negative 16. I have more negatives in this case. Okay, so I can still make 3 0 pairs. And after that, I'm going to have negative 13 left over. And finally, not finally, actually now I got to do the 12 plus 12. I can make 0 pairs. There's still more negatives. How many more negatives? There's 1 more negative, so I'm going to have 1 negative left, and I'm going to add that finally to 31. I can make 1 0 pair. I know there are more positives. How many more positives? There are 30 more positives, and that's your final answer, 30. At the age of 21, Tiger Woods, blah, blah, blah. So Tiger set the tournament record with the lowest score. What was his total score? So we're going to have to add all this. So his score on round 1 is negative 2, plus negative 6, plus negative 7. And in golf, the lower your score, the better. Negative 2 and negative 6, no 0 pairs, right? So I can just become negative 8. I'm going to add to that to negative 7. Again, I can't make 0 pairs, and negative 8 plus negative 7 is negative 15. And finally, I added to the last group of negative 3. I put it in parentheses. And negative 15 plus negative 3, again, no 0 pairs. It's just going to be a bigger bunch of negatives, and I get negative 18. So that was his score at the end. And what was his mean? Well, I added all the numbers, right? And to find the mean, I'm going to take the negative 18 and I divide it by 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and 18 divided by 4, let's see, 18 divided by 4 is 4, 16, 2 left over. Add a decimal. 4 goes in 20, 4.5. So his score was negative 4.5 per round. Okay, that was his average. Okay. On the back page, so we haven't gone through equations. You did them last year. There's 2 ways you can think of a number. So this here says negative 5 times a number I don't know equals negative 45. So you can solve this by isolating the variable and dividing each side by negative 5, or if you want to just quickly do it, think of a number that multiplied by 5 equals 45. Well, your choices are 9 or negative 9 right now, right? So, but if I make this a 9, it's a negative times a positive, which is going to give me a negative, so that works out. If I put negative 9 over here, I get a negative times a negative, and that won't work out because the answer is negative, right? Because a negative times a negative is a positive. So this doesn't work. So my only choice is going to be the 9. Same thing here. Negative 72 equals 8 times this mystery number that's represented by the letter D. So 8 times what is 72? Well, it's either times 9 or times negative 9. Well, if I put positive 9 here, 8 times 9, they're both positive, I'm going to get 72. Well, it's not what I'm looking for. But if I put negative 9, 8 times 9 is 72. Positive times a negative is a negative. This is the answer I'm looking for. Same thing here. I need negative 6 times a number to equal positive 48. Well, I know that a negative times a positive is a negative. So a negative, this has to be a negative number because a negative times a negative equals a positive. So we know that 6 times 8 is 48, and it has to be negative because negative times a negative equals positive 48. So that's my answer. Half of a number equals negative 4. Well, you're multiplying over here, right? 1/2 times a number equals negative 4. Well, half is positive. The m, let me replace the m with a question mark. So half of what number equals 4? Well, can't be a positive number because half times a positive number, positive times a positive, won't give you a negative. So whatever this mystery number is, it has to be negative. Well, what's half of what number equals 4? Well, it has to be 8. Half times 1/2 times negative 8 equals negative 4. So just quickly, right, if you put it over 1, if you cancel before multiplying, 2 divided by 2 is 1, 8 divided by 2 is 4, and we can't simplify anymore. 1 times 4 is 4, and 1 times 1 is 1, right? And that 4 equals the 4 on the other side, except that it's negative. Again, same thing here. Half of a number is negative 7, right? So a number that I don't know of, I'll put a question mark, divided by 2 equals negative 7. Well, what divided by 2 equals 7? Well, it's 14. So now you got to have to worry if it's 14 positive or 14 negative. Well, let's try 14. Positive divided by positive is definitely not negative. So this has to be negative. So n is 14, or sorry, negative 14. 26, 28 divided by a number equals negative 4. 28 divided by what number is 4? Well, let's worry about the number first. Well, it has to be 7. Now, does that 7 need to be negative, or can it be positive? Well, 28 is positive, and the positive divided by positive does not equal negative. So this 7 has to be a negative, because remember, if they have different signs, the answer will be negative. Negative 10 equals a number divided by 4. So a number divided by 4 equals 10. Let's focus on the number. What number can that be? Well, what divided by 4 equals 10? You can just multiply this because we can use inverse operation. It would be 40, right? 40 divided by 4 equals 10. Will that work out? Yeah. So if you do 40 divided by 4, you get 10. And then you bring the minus sign. Negative 10 equals negative 10. So the answer, B in this case, equals 40. Last one. What does this say? Negative 1. Ooh. How do I read this? Negative 1 divided by a number equals 3. How do I go about making this somewhat simpler? Negative 1 divided by a number equals 3. I'm going to take this and do it, I'm going to write it horizontally. I'll write it like this. Negative 1 divided by z equals 3. Right? So what we can do here is we can use fact families to do this. So let me give you an example. Let me use this as a guide. 10 divided by 2 equals 5. What else can I say? I can say that 10 divided by 5 equals 2, right? I can also say that 2 times 5 equals 10, or that 5 times 2 equals 10. So based on this model, which I can apply here, right? What is one thing I can say? So it's negative 1 divided by z equals 3. I can also say that negative 1 divided by 3 equals z, right? So I can also say that, will that help you? I don't think so. So I know what z is. What is z? By putting it this way, I know that z equals 1 divided by 3. So another way of writing that is that z equals negative 1 divided by 3. So that we find the value of z in this manner by using fact family. So if I substitute here, negative 1 divided by, it's a fraction, so this becomes a complex fraction, equals 3. Let's see if that works out. Negative 1 divided by negative 1/3. Let's see if that equals to 3. Let me just make that negative 1 a little shorter. Right? So negative 1 multiplied by the inverse here is still negative. 3 divided by negative 1, right? I can simplify before I multiply this negative 1 and this negative 1, right? The negative times a negative is going to be a positive, and I can cross out, and I'm left with just 3, which equals 3 on this side. Okay, we'll definitely talk about this situation a little bit more clear. I don't think I was very clear. Okay, so that's one of your assignments. Stop recording. And